Hi, this is Warren from Toyota Technical Training. Today I want to help you from having that very bad day with a four-wheel drive problem. I want to use two paper tools to help you to better understand what's happening with a four-wheel drive system and make an accurate diagnosis. I'm going to use a TAS pre-call worksheet and a QTG for 2007 Tundra that we have out back in the shop. So in addition to having your vehicle on the rack and prepped, you're going to need to have a few more materials. Obviously, the first one is going to be your TAS pre-call worksheet. Now on the worksheet, there are two different sections. We want to know what's going on with the vehicle mechanically, and then we're going to diagnose what's happening electrically, and then we're going to surmise where my problem might be. It's also a good idea to print out any QTGs that you may have for this truck, and for mine it happens to be an 07 Tundra, so I did find that there is a QTG for it. It's also useful to have a copy of the EWD. So let's see if we can verify the complaint. Okay, four-wheel drive light is flashing. Selector's in 4 high, we're in drive. Try to give a little bit of gas, get it to engage. Same response. Outside of the vehicle, the rear wheel's spinning. Front wheel is not turning. Let's take a look underneath the vehicle and see what's happening with the front drive shaft. The front drive shaft is not turning, so I know that the T-case is in two-wheel drive. Now turn the front drive shaft and observe the front wheels. Then turn both the front wheels together and observe the drive shaft to determine whether or not the ADD is engaged or disengaged. Everything that I just did is right off of the TAS pre-call worksheet. I know now that when I put the vehicle into switch position for four-wheel drive, that only the four-wheel drive light flashes, that green light flashed. Only the rear wheels turn, the front wheels do not, the front drive shaft does not, so I know a lot about what's happened in the system now. It really is just in two-wheel drive. Now we're going to take a look at what's happening electrically, and we're going to use the QTG to help us identify where that is. The next step in four-wheel drive diagnosis is to leave the truck running, leave the switch in 4 high. I've turned them off to make the sound quality a little bit better for this video. I'm going to now access my four-wheel drive ECU, and using my meter, I want to do some back probing and take some measurements and find out what the voltages are on the circuits that are involved on this truck. Using the QTG, notice I've got the page here for 4 high. On the right side, I've got a back side of the four-wheel drive ECU connector. I've also got my circuits that are involved. Remember, not every truck has every circuit, and it gives me the pin numbers for my connector. And on the right side, this shows me all the voltages that I should have for all the different pins when I go to back probe. So what I'm going to do is start with 2.4 at pin 11. My expected voltage with the truck running in 4 high is below 1.5 or about 0. I'm going to make notes in the right-hand column and then transcribe those back onto the TAS pre-call worksheet. So just as a friendly reminder, when you go to back probe, it's really important that you simply get the pin in next to the wire that you want to check. You slide it in gently. You don't want to pierce the wire. If you do that, you're going to cause problems with either a broken wire or with corrosion in the future. So again, just in there gently next to the wire. Now that I've transferred my information back onto the TAS pre-call worksheet, notice that I've got about half the blanks filled in and about half are empty. That's okay. Remember that this is a generic worksheet and not every vehicle has every one of these switches. So I've got information, that's great, but what does this really mean? I want to go back to the QTG and I want to share a few things with you on the QTG. Notice that I've got some of these boxes highlighted with different markers. The top box in pink, this is my driver controlled switch to go from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive or 4 low. This section in yellow, this is inside of the T-case, all right, inside my T-case actuator. These are my limit switches and a detection switch to tell whether or not the motor moved enough to move the T-case from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive. The bottom section here in orange, that's for the computer to be able to detect whether or not the motor moved enough to shift from 4 high to 4 low. So I've got all these switches inside of my actuator. The section down here in green, this is on the front axle. This is your ADD, and these are the detection and limit switches there. Now, looking at the results I obtained. Remember, I had this truck trying to go into four-wheel drive, so I had the switch in 4 high, and these are all the voltages that I obtained in red in the column on the right. The next column in, these are my expected, so I've highlighted all the different places where I had an error or the voltages didn't match. Well, I see here now that my two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive shift doesn't seem to have ever occurred. I'm looking here at the switches. I've got TL1, TL3, four-wheel drive. Those are the 3 that are incorrect. And looking at the switches, when I'm in four-wheel drive, if the shift occurred, TL1, the switch should be open. TL3, the switch should be closed. Four-wheel drive detection, the switch should be closed. So an open switch, the computer should read 12 volts. Closed switch, the computer should read 0 volts. Closed switch, the computer should read 0 volts. So source 0, 0, that's what it expected, but I got just the opposite. So this is telling me that this motor never moved, or all 3 of the switches had issues where they didn't register. Which one's more likely? Same with the ADD. Because my two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive switch never took place, or I don't believe it did, we never got this far, so naturally this wouldn't have happened either. And I recognize that from my operation flow down here at the bottom. Now, one thing I want to check real quick, my switch checked out okay in four-wheel drive. If I put that switch back into two-wheel drive, these are all my results. Notice what happened here with the switch. The switch went into two-wheel drive, those readings were good. All these other readings match. So doesn't this tell me that the truck is really in two-wheel drive and no shift ever took place? So my next step now is going to be to go back out to the shop and to check the motor itself to see whether or not the motor actually operates. So back out at the truck. Your next step in this progression would be to determine whether or not the four-wheel drive transfer case motor can actually work. That's going to be a whole nother subject for a whole nother video. But what's important now is that you know a little bit about how to use a TAS pre-call worksheet and a QTG to diagnose where your problem is.